it to make the link shareable. So what I will do is I'm going to email you all this, okay? So everyone will have a copy of this in your email. So there's a couple links in there if you want to click later. So, and this is pretty short, but. So, and who mentioned, one of you mentioned Snapseed. I forget who mentioned it, but Snapseed is a really great app for phones. And you just need a smartphone, but Android or iPhone, any kind of phone, it's all free. And it's a Google-based app. And the thing I like about it is there are a lot of things you can do in it, like a lot of controls. So here's just a couple little screenshots from it. But even if you look all the way to the right, for any of you who've been in Photoshop and have experienced like curves, like you can even adjust all of that with this app. Now, I will say personally, I just enjoy editing on my computer screen because I like seeing the image larger. I feel like on my phone it's like, so little sometimes, but of all the apps I've tried, this has been like my favorite. And then this one, so you can do, oops. The VSCO filter, this is more, you can do videos and photos. This one's like super popular with my teenagers, high schoolers. So I thought it would be fun to share it with you all too. There's a lot of fun things you can do, kind of like filters, and again, like it's best for like classic look filters. So there's tons of fun things you can play around with it. It's not as like fine-tuned editing as like Snapseed is. It's more kind of like filters and kind of like a quick edit sort of a thing. And then the next two are actually two Adobe apps, and they're both free. So these are free apps that you can have on your phone. And to be honest, I'm not sure about tablet, if this would be free for tablet or not. Might be worth it to check it out. But the Adobe Photoshop Express is really nice for just like general photo editing. Of course, it's not as detailed as like actual Photoshop or even like the Snapseed perhaps, but you can do some pretty neat things with it. And then this one, the Adobe Photoshop Fix, is really good for portraits. It kind of has specific things for portraits. And this one, it says iPad in the screenshot too. I just noticed. So it looks like you could probably use this one on a tablet as well, which then of course you're seeing your screen a little bit bigger, which might be nice. Again, phones are so tiny. Okay, so these are the two that I recommend for on your computer, totally free photo editing. So there's Pixlr and there's GIMP. GIMP is, you actually have to download it. And I've downloaded it, and kind of like the image you're seeing here, that's like a little logo. It's like the little foxy looking guy with the paintbrush in his mouth, but that's the little logo. And you can kind of see the interface there. It has a similar-ish look to Photoshop-ish, a little bit different though. And then Pixlr, the cool thing about Pixlr, and I haven't been on Pixlr in a little while because I do typically use Photoshop or Lightroom, but Pixlr has updated, and they now have like a simple editor and like a full version editor that's pretty comparable to Photoshop actually. And it's 100% free, all web-based. So depending on where you're at, if you've never like gone into like a Photoshop looking type interface before, the simple editor is nice to use because it's more kind of, you just click things and things kind of happen for you, whereas in the other editor you're fine tuning and doing things. All right, so, and I thought actually I've got this open, so can you guys see this too? So these are some of my photos that I've taken. So I love portraits. That's kind of my thing. But I'll kind of show you a few. Everything was edited in either Photoshop or Lightroom for the most part. This is like one of my, this is Hannah, one of my seniors I had. So I've done some senior photos. It's my nephew. Senior photos, and this is actually my sister-in-law's sister on the other side. But her senior photo, Aubrey. This is Grace, another senior photo. So most of this is my daughter, Stella. This is when she's 4
Hi,
years
Stella.
but that's Stella.
Adorable.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I think so too. She's blonde like her dad, which is fun. That's my brother and sister-in-law. That's after he proposed to her. I hid in the bushes and took photos. These are a couple of my cousins' kiddos.
Cute.
Senior photo.
Mm.
This is a colleague. I took photos of her announcing to her husband that she was pregnant, and kind of got their reactions and stuff. So that was fun.
Very cute.
This is my older brother and sister-in-law and nephew. This is like 4 years old, but a couple of my cousins' kiddos.
Cuties.
My sister-in-law. Another senior photo.
Nice.
This is my daughter and nephew. Again, they're about 4 here. We were apple picking. It's my cousin and her husband. But I'd always, go drive around. This was like a barn. I just found this abandoned barn when I was living in Michigan. Different. This is that same barn. This is my younger brother and his now wife. These were a couple people I just had some of my cousins were like, hey, I have some friends that want some photos. So I actually didn't even know these people, but had taken their photos. I've done a couple weddings. This is Stella. This is at Lake Michigan. This is in the background. One of my cousin's kiddos.
Oh, cute.
This is kind of funny. That's my brother on the right, my younger brother. Sometimes I love to
pair of those.
Yeah, you're right. I think we all do. This is Stella again. She's about 4.
That's a sweet picture.
Yeah, thank you. This is one of my favorites. I actually have this one printed really big. It's in a really big frame hung on my wall. So it's one of my favorites of her. Another senior photo. Senior photo. Little kiddos. But again, you can just, I just try to, as far as my edits go, I just try to base them on like the individual picture I take. When I'm taking photos, I try to think of the composition first. One of my major goals is I try to not crop as much as possible. I kind of learned that in my photography class in college, is you should do most of that when you're taking the photo. You should be thoughtful about framing and what you're doing. Don't try to rely on editing. Editing is to help enhance. It shouldn't be everything you do. A lot of what happens when you take the photo. So I always that stuck out to me, my professor, when he said that. And I really try to be thoughtful about my compositions when I'm taking a photo. This is one of my friends' babies. Couple of my cousins' kiddos. It's one of my friends.
Nice.
Done some headshots, and it's my younger brother. So I've done some action kind of things.
Yeah, that's good.
Senior photo. It's one of my good friends. That's one of my very best friends. She lives up in Montana, up in Bozeman. She's a planner for the city of Bozeman, like a city planner. And her job is so cool. One of my cousins and her kids in Lake Michigan. Another one of my cousins.
At the barn.
At the barn, that's the barn. This was after my brother proposed. Their friends showed up with some champagne. My cousin's kiddos and the dog.
That is cute.
This is Stella again. We lived in Wisconsin for a little bit, and our house backed up to this cornfield. So it was kind of nice. It's my brother. And with his life jacket on. It's from the same scene with those other glasses. Hi, friends, kiddos.
Cute.
Yeah, I love portraits of people. I love expressions. I love those natural moments. This was a wedding. This was a small, all the weddings I've done have been like little. I've never done like a massive, huge wedding. That would be kind of out of my league. But like I've done, here's another one, just some like small, more intimate weddings, 50 people sort of a thing. This was yeah.
Said not, to compose most of it, don't try not to crop. So
Yes.
when you edit, are you editing mostly for light or for skin tone, or what are you editing?
That's a great question, Joanne. So I'll talk a little bit about that, but the first thing is I look for the exposure. So I go back to the lighting and fix exposure first. And so I'll show you, I'll give you a little demo in just a minute of how I kind of start with that. But all these photos that I'm showing you right now, I edited through a similar process. So let me open up Pixlr a minute. That's the one I'm going to show you. This is honestly the preferred one, in my opinion. I can't believe this is free. They do have a pro version now, but what you can do with the free is pretty awesome. So this is what it looks like when you get to the website. And then the Pixlr X, that's the basic, like, simple photo editor. And then the Pixlr E, that's the one I use. That's the more like Photoshop interface. And what I'd say to you is, even if you've never been in Photoshop before, don't be intimidated by this. It's not, it's not as scary as it seems. The other thing I can do is, of course, this class is being recorded and will be posted, but I can even record like a short version of me doing like an edit with my steps that I kind of do, so you can see that process. And I can post that video and share that with you all. So when you get here, of course, you have a couple options. You can, if you have images saved on the web, you can load from a URL, or of course, if it's on your computer, you just open image, which is typically, you know, what you do. You can also create new and use this as like a drawing program. Like, you can actually draw and make art in this, just like you can in Photoshop. So you could create with a blank document, or let's say you want to make a collage of many photos. You might start with a blank document and then import the different photos. But I just want to start simple. I don't want to overwhelm you all, for those, especially if you've never been into anything like this before. And of course, for some of you, some of this may be a little review, but you know, that's always a good thing. So open image, I just have some like sample photos that I put in here. None of these have any edits on them. They are just totally the photo from my camera. So when you can resize the image. Now here's the one potential downfall of this program, but maybe it's not a downfall at all. It's just something to consider, is because you're on the web, not your actual computer, like the size of your photo could impact it. Like, my photos are massive because I'm using my DSLR camera, whereas if you're uploading a photo from your phone, it might not have this pop up. It might not be as big. So I'm just doing like full HD, the medium, and I'll just click apply. There we go. Okay, so again, here's this photo. No edits. When I'm taking the photo, a couple things I consider is, am I cutting out at all? Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
A thing popped up and told me my internet was funky, so I just wanted to make sure I was clear before I kept talking. Perfect. So again, I think about the crop, and that's not to say I don't ever crop. Like, please no, like, it's not like I'm against not for the crop tool. Like, I totally use the crop tool sometimes. I just try to think of my composition and consider it while I'm taking the photo. But sometimes that doesn't always happen. Sometimes if you're capturing movement or something that happens quick and you're pulling out your camera and you're just snapping a photo, you have to crop it afterwards. So, you know, I don't want to say that to be like, oh, you mustn't use crop tool. You know what I mean? Like, you can totally crop. That's fine. The other thing, you know, we talked about in some of the earlier classes is exposure, and ISO on our camera. We've talked about our aperture, f-stop, and our shutter speed. So initially, when I'm taking my photo, I'm setting my camera settings to what I hope is correct, to give me correct exposure, to give me enough light. That's what I'm hoping for when I'm taking my photo. Now, of course, you know, I can look at it on that little LCD screen or whatever, and, you know, maybe see that, oh, it looks pretty good. But when I get on my computer, I might be like, oh, actually, it's a little darker than I thought it was, or it's a little lighter than I thought it was. I mean, you've probably had that happen to you before, right? It didn't quite turn out like you thought it did on that little preview box on your camera. So what the first thing I do is I check my exposure. And there's two ways you can do this. So under adjustment, you are going to find curves and you're going to find levels. Now, curves is more advanced and lets you fine tune things, but can be trickier to learn. Whereas levels is pretty straightforward, but you can't control as much. So which one should you use? I say try both. You're gonna just play around with both. But levels and curves, I always start there. I mean, maybe like I mentioned the whole crop thing, I might crop first, but otherwise I'm starting with levels or curves. So I'll just show you levels first. This is what pops up. Now the Photoshop one looks pretty similar to this too, okay? Now that graph you're seeing right here, this is all the information of your picture, okay? This is showing you your lights, your mediums, and your darks that are contained in your image. That's why you've got a dark arrow, you've got a medium arrow, and you've got this light arrow. Now my exposure, I mean, not to toot my own horn, is pretty darn good on this photo. And I can tell that because the black arrow and the white arrow is where the information is starting to rise. Sometimes if you have poor exposure, this graph does not look like this. It looks on either end is really long and straight, like really straight, and all the information is like bunched up in the middle. So, and sometimes maybe it's on the dark end or on the light end. So that's how you know your exposure maybe wasn't totally correct. Now I'll tell you, when I first started photography, my exposure did not look like this, not at all. I got better with using my camera. That's why my exposure looks like this when I pull up my levels. But I would probably still fine tune this a bit. So if you're looking at my image here, here's how I use levels. I take the black and I scooch it to the right as the information starts to rise. And now down here, I love this feature on Pixlr. I think it's the coolest thing ever. If you hold this down, you can see the before and after.
Oh.
So here's before. Can you see how it's a little bit lighter? Here's after. It's very subtle. But again, my exposure was pretty darn close. But guess what? You can fix photos like this. If you ever take a washed out photo and you slide that little black icon over, you can fix photos that you think are ruined. I mean, they may not be like perfect, please know this, but I've done a lot with photos that I thought, you know, maybe I only got this one shot and this is the only photo I got of it, but it's not great. This can help you fix some of those too, I will tell you. And so here's the light. I could do the same thing. I can move the light over too. And so here's the before, here's the after. Before, after. Such a subtle edit.
Yeah.
But the after, I mean, looks better. There's more contrast, there's a little bit more color, warmth in skin. It's very subtle. The shadows are a little darker, so it just pops a bit more. So that could be a bare minimum edit. I do this with every photo I take that I would like give to someone. I would do that as a bare minimum edit. Now, you have some other fun features here. You have red, you have green, and you have blue. So you can go into these and check out what happens here. You can play with your warms and your cools. So think of like this is for like new, you know, kids and teens these days who love like filters and Instagram and pop it, you know what I mean? This is like the old school way to do that. Like all those filters were made from like recipes that someone came up with by doing it individually like this. So you can essentially, like if I move this over, I've just cooled it down. I got rid of some of the red. So here's the before, here's the after. And I'm not saying, you know, it depends what you like, but you can do it on this end too. I can warm it up. Before, after. Okay. And then again, I can play with all these different ones for different combinations. I mean, you can spend a lot of time on one photo just playing around, all these little different things you can do. Okay. So those are levels. When you get things how you like it, hit apply. I'm going to hit cancel though, because I want to show you curves. So curves, and you're gonna know some similarities. You still have the ability to control your red, your green, and your blue, or all of it. And you have this compare button too. So the thing about curves, I remember when my professor showed me this for the first time, I was like, what? I was like, I don't like looking at graphs, you know? That was kind of my whole thing. So I stuck with levels for a long time. My levels. I did my levels, the thing I showed you before. I stuck in that for the longest time because curves sort of intimidated me. Then I was like, you know what? That's silly. I'm going to figure this out. So here's kind of how I use curves, but there's different things you can do with them. So up here, now I will tell you this interface of curves does not look as good as Photoshop's because you can't see the information right here. And in Photoshop, you can see all the information just like you can with the levels. I'm just kind of, I don't know why I didn't notice that before. So actually maybe in here, the other
What kind of information?
Your lights and your darks, just like we saw, you know how that curvy line or the wavy, what we saw before, that's usually sitting inside of this graph. And then where you can see which way to pull. But typically what I do in this, see how it's divided in that you got your quarters. So up in this upper hand corner where this intersects, I click here and I pull it up. That's gonna brighten. So here's my before, here's my after. So this one I pull up, this one I click, gotta grab it, and I pull down. So there's my before, there's my after. So upper right, I pop it up. This lower quadrant, I pop it down. So I do a pop up and a pop down. And that, I've learned that this gives me brighter, this brightens, this pulls my contrast. And that's what I like the look of in a photo. That's personally, I enjoy a little bit of brightness with some contrast. I like that look, so that's, I pop it up, pop it down. But doesn't mean you have to do it that way. But just, I want to show you, like, look at, I can pull this, like, look how crazy you can make it. So curves, this is why I was so intimidated. I was like, what? And then if I pull it up, I'm gonna lose contrast, okay? So like, again, if you ever have a photo that's washed out like this, you can use curves to pull it down and it will bring your contrast back for you.
Wow.
Okay, so honestly, in the world of photo editing, that's your best friend. I think you can do an amazing amount of stuff just with that. And what you're controlling there is your exposure, your lightness and your darkness. Okay, so it's compensating for what you did when you took the photo, what your settings were. So maybe your f-stop should have just, your aperture should have just been up, open a little bit more, let a little bit more light in. Then you wouldn't have had to do as much of an edit. But again, this is why we edit. This is why we get to do this. Because back in the darkroom, you didn't know some of this stuff, or you didn't have as much control. You had to do the dodging and the burning, you know, and some of that kind of stuff, which by the way, you can do in here too. So I'm gonna apply this and save this a minute because I just wanna show you a couple other little features and fun things. So over here, where it says layers. Some of you mentioned this. Some of you mentioned this confused you. Some of you, yeah. So this is like, you got to get to know this. Don't be scared of your layers. Layers can become your best friend. So layers are how I get some of my like other fun little things I like to do. So I'm going to show you something super simple that you could try and it would get you comfortable with your layers. The first thing we need to look at in our layers palette is there's a lock right here. So right now this is locked. I can't do anything to this. So I need to unlock it. To unlock it, I can just double click it. Now it's unlocked. And just by the way, your history down here, this is everything I've done so far. So let's say I want to undo something. I can delete that. Oops, I just accidentally deleted my image. Don't do that. But there, I can go back.
Mm-hmm.
Whoopsies. And then this little arrow right here, this toggles your visibility. So right now, my picture's there, but I can't see it. And because there's nothing behind it, this checkerboard means transparent, just so you know. This little checkerboard signifies transparency. So there's nothing behind it, so I can toggle that back on. So I'm gonna hit this plus right here, and you have options. This is really fun. This is where I could add another image. I could add text, or I can just do something blank, which is what I'm going to do. So right now, my blank layer is on top of my picture because it goes in order that you see it. So you can just drag this underneath, and now it's underneath the picture. So if I click this, there's, of course, it's just clear, there's nothing there, but that's my background. You can also, I'm wondering if you can, yeah, okay. So here's where you can do some little edits to your layer with these three little buttons, these three little dots. I can retitle this. So, you know, I'm just gonna call this sample because I don't really know what else to call it, but you can title it whatever you want. So sometimes when you have lots of layers, titling them different things is helpful because then you can figure out which one you need to go to quickly. You can also do what's called a blend mode, which I'll come back and talk more about that in a minute. Here's the lock, the visibility. Here's some other little things you can do. You can duplicate a layer to make a copy real quick. You can flatten an image, which is what you do when you're done with something that takes all your layers and smooshes them together and makes it one thing. That's what you do, excuse me, when you want to save it. You don't want to save it or share it with all these layers because that makes a big old file. When you flatten it, it presses it down and makes it into a file you could share with someone.
Okay.
So just something really quick, I'll just show you a sample. So I'm on this background image. So over here, you have some different tools that are kind of fun to use. You've got a gradient tool, you've got a paint bucket, so you could fill a solid color just with your paint bucket there. You've got this gradient, I think is fun, because if you click up here, you can come in and you can pick a gradient. You can do like a gradient like this. Then what I'll do is go back to my background, go into the little toggle, and if I lower my transparency, I can get a little bit of that gradient to shine through. Maybe like a sun flare, like that golden light. You can, you know what I mean? Or you can, so again, this is like the how you could make a filter. So all I did, something super simple, is I just layered a gradient underneath this to give it like a warmth, kind of sunshiny feel. And that's a super simple little edit, something you could do. And just to show you like what would happen if I try this one instead. I could pop this back up. Ooh, that's really red. Or let's try this orange. Ooh, that's kind of fun. I like that. And just FYI, if I have this visibility on, but my sample is highlighted, I can like real time see my changes. because it's only going on my sample layer. It's not touching my background layer. But this allows me to just, visualize and see. But if I turn this off, there's that gradient. So again, that's just a super little simple fun thing you could try if you like that. Some other things you do have over here, you have like a blur sharpen smudge tool. So if you click this right here up at the top, blur mode, sharpen mode, smudge mode. And not that there's anything I'd want to necessarily smudge on here, but sometimes there is. Sometimes there's like a weird crisp hair, when you're taking a portrait and someone's like weird hair is like sticking out of their head and there's only like one. The blur tool can soften that to make it, because sometimes wispy, I mean, it's natural, but maybe you want to soften it so it's not so crisp. That could be something you use that for, or smudging or blurring a background. You could play with that to kind of create that blurred effect if you didn't do that with your camera but want to put that in. And then of course your brush, you have all these different things you can do with your brush. You've got the size, of course, the softness. So if it's really soft, your edges are going to just be really soft. And if you have it, the hardness like this, it's going to be crisp, really crisp edge. So you can think about that kind of thing. And then look at all these fun shapes. You got all these different shapes of things you can do with brushes. So like sometimes I'll even, this is not going to be, actually, I don't know why you'd want to necessarily smudge with a color, but I was just talking about the brushes in general in case you want to do something. Like, for example, I could click on the paintbrush and I could pick a brush, maybe make it really soft. And maybe, I put some, what I mean, like, not that I'd want to do this, but just to show you like how it kind of works, right? And again, I'm on the sample. So like, let's say you wanted to tint or tone something, you could do it this way. Because the softness makes it so it doesn't look like a crisp painted edge. It looks like I'm just like kind of tinting something, right?
Yeah.
So that's something how you can play with that.
Can
You
you
have a
draw
question?
an actual thing? Like a mustache on his face?
Yes. Okay. So since Cheryl wants to go that route, I mean, we've already made this a little silly, so why not? We're just playing. And just so you know, down here with your colors, so you have you can have two colors out at a time, a primary and kind of like a secondary, like background color. That's how I got you can pick your gradient colors from here too. And you can also toggle the switch to turn which one is your primary. And if you click, this is your picker. So you can pick whatever colors that you want. But okay, let's say you want to draw like a mustache, or you're being silly, which could be fun. Maybe you want to make a fun card for someone and send them a silly picture. That can be super fun. Actually, when I show kids Photoshop and I show them some of the funny things you can do, they love it. They love making photos look silly. So
I'm a kid.
yeah. So now I would maybe want to be on the actual background, but like, so here's my actual paintbrush now. And it's maybe way too big. And you can zoom. Okay, so if you want to zoom in on something. Now notice it's starting to look more pixely when I zoom in, of course. You can start to see because I'm more than 100% zoomed at that time. So let's make this look smaller. But yeah, I can actually like, ooh, you know what I mean? Like actually draw onto here with the paintbrush. I think it looks kind of cute.
It's adorable.
So I'll show you some other kind of fun things you can do too. This tool, the Liquify tool. You click this Liquify tool. Oh my goodness. Like there's so many funny things you can do, but there's like purposeful things too, but also funny things. So up here tells you all these things you can do. You can push things out, you can enlarge things, you can shrink things, swirl right, swirl left, or of course, go back. So pushing things simply means, and you can make your brush different sizes. Let's say this is nice for like those stray hairs too. or something. And again, I don't have the best example. This is not the best picture, but I'm just going to use it because, you know, it's up. But so this is the push. If I click and push, see, I can like reshape things. I can push things out and push things in. Push, like, I just changed the shape of his earlobe. You know, and so here's
and
the.
You thought my mustache was.
I know, right? I didn't even tell you about Liquify yet. You guys can go crazy. I think you should all find someone and make a funny picture of them and send them to them just for a little, you know, little laugh. But yeah, you know, so you can do things like that. Here's the enlarge.
Wow.
This is crazy, you guys. So the enlarge, of course, makes things bigger.
That's an easy way of doing it, though. It's so much easier than Adobe Photoshop.
So you think so, Joanne? Are you like it?
I think so. I think this is quicker.
Okay, cool. But I mean, I'm just, like I said, I think this program is awesome, which is why I'm sharing it with you all, because like the things you can do with it. And then here's the
something in the pictures.
Yes, you can. I'll show you a technique for that in just a minute.
Okay.
So if you want to make something smaller, let's see, what could I make smaller? Oh, this poor kid.
His chin.
I know. His chin. Okay. So if I click, I can shrink things down. Like you can change what someone looks like completely. I mean, and here you go. You wonder how all those magazine covers are done. There you go. You know, shrink it down, erase it. That's how it's done, really, you know, with these tools.
Take out the wrinkles.
Yeah, exactly. Take out the wrinkles. It's not hard to do. This tool I'm going to show you next is a great way to do it. A pimple, gone. A wrinkle, gone. A weird hair, gone.
Wow.
Seriously. Yeah. The swirl, I've never really figured out. I just think it's weird. So maybe it's more artsy than anything, but you click and you just swirl things.
Ooh, I like
so
that.
It's fun, right? I mean, I could give someone some curls. But you can, I mean, it's just kind of silly, right? But that's
so what's fun?
But yeah, so that's the Liquify feature. We've totally made a different child, but so over here is your clone tool. Right here, you can do amazing things. Okay, so if you click this clone tool, now I will, I haven't fully, okay, let's see. Oh, here we go. Here we go. This is a little bit different than in Photoshop. So if you've ever used a clone stamp in Photoshop, it's different here. In Photoshop, you have to hold down the control button or the command. I always forget what one it is, but I know when I'm doing it.
Command or something.
Yeah, isn't that weird? I couldn't tell you, but I know when I'm doing it.
When you do it, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few things like that in my life, but up here you have source and you have paint, which kind of makes it nice, meaning you don't have to click anything else. So when you're on source, okay, let's say, do you guys see this kind of like white or lighter strip in the background? Probably some like hay or branch or something. Let's say I didn't want that in this picture, or there's something funky in the background, a sore spot, it was weird, a tag is flipped up on someone's shirt, hair is weird, something weird, okay? What you do is you take the source and you pick what do you want it to look like. So I would just want it to be this green color because I just want to make that cover everything. So that's my source. So I click here and I basically see that little icon. That's like it's taking a picture. I basically like took a picture of that background, and now when I go paint with it, it's taking, of course, and here's the key with this is you have to keep taking pictures and then painting. Pictures, painting, pictures, painting, unless your background was one solid color. Because if you look at those greens, there's all these different greens. So you have to like take a picture, paint, take a picture, paint, take a picture, paint. Sometimes you have to take a picture and paint over something to get rid of the edge. But then, so see what I did here. I'll zoom in. So if you look at what I did here, this is when I could go back to that smudge tool. Yeah. And maybe I could smudge that out. Yeah. Get rid of it. So sometimes you use tools in conjunction with each other. They help each other out. You got to do one tool to do this thing, and then you got to hop to this tool to like finalize it. So
Wow.
yeah. And let me show you one other really cool one. This Band-Aid tool is pretty magical. This is actually your wrinkle eraser, your pimple eraser, your weird spot eraser, your floaty hair in the distance eraser. Let me find something I could erase here. Like again, this photo isn't the best example, but like see this like weird little pinch down here, maybe
Yeah.
from where I did that thing.
Uh-huh.
It could erase. Yeah, you got rid of that. I'm gonna go back because that happened so fast. But you hover over what you want to erase, and it's just so fancy it knows, it like fixes it for you.
Wow.
So it's really good. Like here's like maybe an inconsistent spot in his cheek. I can click, there it fixes it. So it's like a click and fix, click and fix. So I usually start with the heal tool and the Band-Aid tool and do that for the weird things first. But if it's too much for that to handle, like it's not healing, that's when I go to this clone stamp one. So I do try to spot heal first, then I will go to clone stamp for the more, you know, the bigger things. But like you can erase full people out of pictures with the clone stamp. I mean, you can sign.
I've done that. I've done
Yeah,
that.
yep, I've done it too.
I've changed backgrounds on pictures and
So if you have a very old photograph that might have been bent, so you have like a crease in it,
yep, you can do that.
The
okay.
heal, usually I try to heal first. The heal might solve it. If the heal doesn't, clone stamp will take care of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you might need to enlarge the picture more too to do that.
Yes.
To see better.
Joanne, good mention. So clone stamp, I am zooming in, zooming out constantly too. I would say that is the most intensive thing I showed you tonight for sure. And the most time consuming, depending on what you're trying to do, of course.
Yeah.
And I do want to show you this. Actually, we do have a dodge and burn. You have a digital dodge and burn. So let's say you edit your exposure, but there's still one funky spot that's too bright or too dark, and you just couldn't fix it with your curves and your levels. Dodging and burning can fix that. So dodge and burn, you can either lighten or darken. And then you can even range, you can play with your range of shadows, midtones, highlights, so you can play. So if you lighten, of course, it's gonna just, you know, you paint it on, essentially. You're painting the area. And see how that's lighter now?
Yeah.
Wherever I paint, I'm basically like dodging. This is the dodging. I don't want it to be exposed so much, or I can darken it. I can like burn it darker.
Okay.
So if this is too light, I want it darker, I can paint this in and it'll push that darker. So you can see that little darker spot over here. So that's the dodge and burn. And then this one is, oh yeah, okay. So this is increasing your color. But truthfully, I kind of stay away from this. I don't mess with like saturation and vibrance and temperature much because I do like this kind of stuff, what I showed you. I put in layers with gradients and I build it myself. But let's say that's intimidating for you and you don't want to do that. I'll delete this a minute. We're left with just, there we go. So I can do vibrant, saturation, temperature. So you can play around with this, and that's increasing or decreasing. So I can increase the temperature, so I can just paint.
So that's another paint tool, you're saying?
It's another paint tool, yeah.
Oh.
I don't know why that didn't actually like do anything. Maybe I just didn't see enough of it.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. There we go. There's the saturation.
So on the thing that I have, you're able to, I don't want to say lasso is not the right one, but it's like you're able to put something around it. And I don't think it's like the lasso, it's the other one that kind of like goes around it. And you can just highlight what's inside that.
Yes, let me show you that in a minute. And I understand it is a little past 6. I'm okay to stay for a few minutes to kind of wrap up these things, but if you have to take off, I understand, and it will still be recorded. I just want to say that because I know we're going a little past 6. That's a great question. So let's say with these brush tools, sometimes it's tricky to stay in just an area that you need to be in. So you have multiple ways to select. Now, it is not as, it's not as good as Photoshop for your selecting, for sure. I mean, Photoshop's gotten pretty good with some of their quick selects and some of their auto selections now, but this isn't too bad. So you have a lasso tool and you have a wand select, and then you have a marquee select. So if you want, marquee would be if you wanted, like, you know, your edges to be, you know, nice and straight, linear, squares, rectangles. Wand select will, like, kind of try to magically select it for you. Like if I want just the hand, I have the wand, I could click here and see how it gets most of the hand, but it's not perfect.
Yeah.
Let's call those the little marching ants. That means that's selected. And you can go up here to the select and you can do invert selection. So now everything but the hand is selected.
Oh,
So you can flip flop them, because sometimes it's easier to select something
Oh, I
little
see.
instead of something big and then flip flop it.
Mm.
So you can go up here to the select menu to mess with that. I'll go
You
back
can-
to just the hand though.
And you
So-
can change the colors for just that one part then.
Yes, I'll show you that too. But I just want to show you up here the mode. You can add or remove. So see how it didn't get all the hand? I can then go add selection and I can click a little bit more and see how it fixed it now.
Nice.
oh, yeah.
Hmm.
So you can, and then if it gets too much, you can click remove and click and it'll take something away. And then these tolerances, this will be like how much it will select, kind of based on the color contrast, because that's kind of how it works. It looks at the contrast and like the shape of things to help define something. So if you're trying to select something that's by stuff that's very similar in color, ooh, magic wand is just gonna give you a headache because it can't like differentiate very well. So that's when you'd want to go to the lasso. So I'm going to deselect this, go to the lasso, and you've got different lassos. Free means I just make it. It's a free form shape.
Mhm.
The polygon is, of course, you're going to have your straight edges like this, and then you have to connect it back to itself and then double click, and then that's how it makes a selection.
Mhm.
And then you've got these guys, which, to be honest, I use magnetic. Like, I hardly use any of them except for magnetic. Magnetic is the one I use most often, because what this does is it follows the edge based on the contrast. And then you just kind of keep clicking, click, 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 click. Of course, I'm not doing it perfect, because honestly, when I select, I can spend an hour selecting something sometimes if it's very like in depth. So I'm just, you know, going quick because of our time. But just click, 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 you know, and then you go back to the beginning and double click and it ends it. So let's say I want to do something just in here. Again, this is just going to be a silly example, but my paintbrush, I've got my purple. That's great. I can go in here and look at, it's only painting inside that selection. I can't paint out of it. I can't. It won't let me. I can only paint inside of it. And then the other thing, if you're in the lasso tool where it says feather, if I have 0, my edge, when I get rid of that selection, the edge from the purple to the hand is going to be crisp, stark. If I scooch this feather out, it will soften it more, have more of a transition. So that's what feather means. So I play with this. And again, just like art in general, there's a lot of experimentation and playing around that has to happen within these tools. It's not like a one size fits all or a one recipe, but kind of like what I showed you at the beginning with the levels, that's where I always start. I always begin with levels or curves, and then I kind of venture from there. But I always want to get my exposure correct before I do any other types of edits. So I'm happy to do more editing. We could do kind of more advanced editing, kind of more steps, dive more into some of these tools, because I know some of my examples are a little silly tonight, but again, it's figuring out where stuff is and like what does this thing do. And sometimes you have to like mess with an image and make it look kind of silly to figure it out. I remember doing that a lot in the beginning when I started too. So but yeah, what do does anyone have any questions